tape number 75. We've entitled this The Encircled Serpent, and you might wonder why I do that. As we go along and we're comparing the things of Mu, we go back into the time where they speak of Apollo and the Python. This is from a book that was entitled The Encircled Serpent by M. Oldfield Howey. It's a really fascinating book. It's a very authoritative study on serpent symbols in all countries and ages, and it gives us 91 illustrations. And you'll find and be shocked to find that such a parallel is drawn that he may not have been aware of, but I've seen reading through the ancient accounts of the Chaldean description of the ancient so-called flood that I have brought a lot of controversy about, that disclaiming the account of the flood has been tampered badly with in our book of Genesis. Proof from the Bible itself and common sense tells us that there is something radically wrong. But as I say, that we talk about and we go back and we find that as we're going to get into some of these symbols here, where it speaks of the cherubim after Cain was driven out of paradise, the Garden of Eden. And anybody who would know and understand that paradise and Eden and the garden is one and the same thing, like how could they deny the irrefutable truth out of the mouth of Christ himself? But unfortunately, as one lady who I esteem greatly, who's a pastor with was a pastor with one of the very large Christian denominations in this country, and she had the honesty to say, while becoming enlightened, and I don't agree with her, but she said, I have no real depth. Now that is quite an astounding claim by somebody who has been through a theological seminary and who preached literally from coast to coast. But in the light and the recognition of some of this new understanding and evidence to make a claim like this. So you see, this is a lot of people today that they're going to deny these things and not see them because they have not got a background of any type of depth. So here we are left with many mysteries to try to answer. If indeed this face that has been found and recorded by our scientists on Mars and what appears to be the outline of not one but possibly several pyramids up on Mars. And I just listened to a program today. Let's see, what's the date today? Today is October, or September. The day's the 20th of September. It shows you I really dwell out there in La La Land, 1991. And they came on the television. They were showing pictures of Mars and so forth. And they said that these scientists come up with the date 300 million years old. And they say that no life, and it was destroyed how many hundreds of thousands of years ago, that the water disappeared. Well, they don't consider that there was a great hydrogen warfare of a magnitude that is beyond the scope and the understanding of our scientists today, that wiped out not only its ozone, but every trace of life on the surface. But now they'd like to go back and dig into that surface. But where did these people go? Well, and you go back through the Greek mysteries and so forth. Let me quote from page 149 of The Encircled Serpent. But Jupiter vanquished Typhon with his thunderbolts and laid him below Mount Etan. That's spelled with an A-E-T-A-N, but the A apparently is silent. Now we find this name running throughout the book of the Chaldean account of the flood. My friends, if I were not so old, in such bad shape, and know that our time is so short, and where we're going to get into the hour pretty soon here of just the struggle of survival, and people like myself will probably be outcast and hunted down and killed or imprisoned. I wish to God that I had woke up to this years ago and might be able and have the time to go back to the Chaldean account of Genesis and the flood and put in footnotes and cross-references here. But see, this Etan or Atan is mentioned throughout those books. We find it appears in the writings or references to it in the Mu Mysteries. And we find the following in Ovid's description of Typhon and the song of the Pleiades. Now listen, does this not sound like a vanquished people? And remember what Job said. I came forth from the bosom of the Father. An old allegory showing that he was genetically related to the greatest Lord of space. And he said, I came forth from the womb of the morning. And another place talked about the mouth. You go back, and I don't know exactly where, but I want you to start learning how to use a concordance, a Strong's preferably, in my opinion, and so you can check me out. I am not without errors, and don't ever take anything that I say as gospel, because I'm still wearing a leather jacket and have not got immortality, and so I'm subject to weakness and mistakes. But he said he came forth in the bosom of the Father in the womb of the morning. Oh, the point I was going to make, where it speaks in the Old Testament of a strange woman, when referring to eating of the trees of the garden was all right. But there was a certain tree or planet out there whose people that this Adam and Eve societies were not to breed with. Now, to eat of the fruit of that tree, it was an old idiom, an old allegory, not to take of that tree. And if you think not, you go back and you find the scripture in the Old Testament that, we're told that a strange woman, one of those not of our race, or say of the earthly race, that she is a deep pit. See, a man can literally, eternally fall by the destruction of his offspring by cohabitating with her. And it says that she, a strange woman, she wipeth her mouth and saying, wherein have we sinned? And I know what a lot of people are going to assume or be under the assumption that that means, but they're wrong. It means to eat of, to lie with, to have sex with these other people. So let's go back and let's read Mayan Waring's translation of talking about the days when they spoke of one of the great gods of space, that he vanquished Typhon with his thunderbolts and laid him below Mount Etan. Now, we understand that a mount is talking about a great spaceship, but a mount is also talking about another world or a planet. And we find the following in Ovid's description of Typhon in the song of the Pleiades. Now listen, which earth is this speaking of? Space station, planet. She, now who is she? She sings from earth's dark womb. How Typhon rose and struck with mortal fear his heavenly foes. How the gods fled to Egypt's slimy soil and hid their heads beneath the banks of Nile. How Typhon from the conquered skies pursued their routed godheads to the seven-mouthed flood. Now, was this referring to a pre-diluvian age, what once again referred to as a flood? There was a great flood of people, left planets and worlds, and came to this one. The seven-mouthed flood forced every god his fury to escape, some beastly form to take or earthly shape. All right, so you see, man has failed to understand for a long time about references to the mouth and to the womb and so forth. And a lot of these sanctimonious churches has overlooked it, thought, my, that's naughty, naughty, naughty. Where it speaks about in the Old Testament, it says, well, I'll do like Christ said, because back in his day there was no chapter 3 and verse 9 of such and such. He just said, as it is written. Get your concordance out, learn to use them. It says, it spoke of the trees of the Garden of Eden. And the Almighty said, you may freely eat of all of the trees, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not take, for on that day that you of the Adam peoples and you of Eve, you start to breed with them, your seed will die out, because you see, the Almighty, with all of his wisdom, he built into the Adamite man a genetical code, if you will, because Christ himself said, my sheep hear my voice, and they will not follow another. All right, so we find periodically a lot of these people, well, because this is the last days, the end time, end of the cosmos, end of the world order, and he says, the end of this world order would not come until there be a great falling away first. So you see, there's a challenge to his offspring, to you and I, to see. He says, blessed is he who holds fast to the end, for he shall be saved. Sartorius, he shall be brought to a place of safety and be placed in the divine government of the eternal, who is building an eternal government, and he's going to give out eternal life to those that are able to overcome this world and all of its fear and doom and gloom and its opposition to the eternal laws of the Almighty. Now, we go back, and because of our failure to understand the idioms and not eating of the trees, it was talking about to lie with, to have sex. He says, when you eat of this tree, this family tree, he said, you shall die. Get your concordance out and look up, and it says, a strange woman is a deep ditch. And it says, it talks of the strange woman, meaning those not of your race, who wipeth her mouth, and she says, wherein have we sinned? No, it's not talking about what you think. It's talking about eating of a tree, a family tree, allegorically to cohabitate with. Now, there are so many things that I would like to discuss, and I hope that I'm not being repetitious here, because I had a slight interruption a while ago and interrupted my tape, and so when it went back on, it was not recording. Now, let me go back here to those of you that, now I did promise that I would send along, I would photostat the symbolism of some of these things and what they mean. Like in the Vigonetti number 11, there's the word K-E-H. Now, I don't know, some of you might have seen many years ago, I think one of the most fascinating documentaries that I ever saw, and it was called Mondo Cane. It's a dog's world. Mondo meaning world, cane like canine. And then we have, as I've explained, Cain. Your King James, the translators tried to hide it, cover it up, lose his identity. So we've lost his identity as the thread of Cain is woven throughout the tapestry of all of the civilizations of this world, that he has affected and destroyed and brought anguish to literally billions of people throughout time and history and antiquity. Now that's a lot to lay upon one man or a mankind that Genesis warned us of, that we're the fallen angels. But you see, the religious world has been duped and deceived by some original deceivers that would have us to believe that the flood covered the whole world and destroyed all of these evil, fallen, angelic hosts. But if you find, as you search back through antiquity, like it talks about Noah, and they would have us to believe that Noah was a black man and that he was one of the sons of Noah. Well, I tell you what, you go try to convert a scientist or somebody who's steeped and learned in genetics, and you tell him that the white boys may, any time, a woman may throw a black boy or a yellow boy. There was a joke about that. Went like this, it says, 2 Wongs don't make a white. And you stop and think about that. 2 Chinese people cannot produce a white boy. So much for that. Let's go back to the KEH, the leaping deer. Now you'll find this runs throughout the fabric of these Nakal tablets. It's a symbol, supposedly, of the first man. And either you want to go with this Adam stuff, or you want to go with Cain. And he goes on and tells this animal was selected. He was supposed to symbolize the first man because of its leaping power. Well, we went into the fact, talk about leaping lizards, and in the Old Testament, why leap ye high hills? And we showed that hills were talking about planets and talking about space stations and great extraterrestrial ships. Now, this man believed, this colonel, from what he deduced from these tablets, that man came upon earth. He was already perfectly developed. He leaped upon the earth in his first and original forms without going through nature's development of life. In other words, he was a special creation. Now, we pointed out what creation means. It means dispatched. Dispatched from where? Now, we would also remind you, so that you might learn the ancient symbols and idioms, because up until this time, I know of no preacher or theological teacher that has ever taken any time, and I have to confess that in my life and my studies that I have been amiss. But there was a period in my youth I didn't even know where to start, because I was sitting under one man who's, if he's still alive, he's way up there in years, and he said he would to God that he understood symbols and symbolism. Well, that's not the total topic of my subject at this time, but you remember in Micah, I know it's not that big a book to read, but Micah, the 5th chapter, I think, and he equated, and he was talking about the people whom the book is written about, the Adam man. He said that you're going to become as rare as the roe, which is a very type of rare deer, even back in those days. And he said, you'll be like the lion lying among the other animals of the jungle. That you're going to be very rare indeed. And what makes me so very sad when it talks about in that day, it says 7 women shall cleave unto one man and take away our reproach. The fact that they're immoral, illicit women left over from this age of promiscuity, that they were not married to a man. They say, let us bake our bread in the same oven. Well, some more idioms and more etymology, because through this homosexuality and this disease called AIDS, there is going to be such a destruction brought not only upon the gay population, but also the heterosexual population, that so many of these women are just going to, they don't know where to turn. But anyway, that's off the subject. Let's go back now. In the Vignette 12, they speak of a symbol. It looks for fire and move. The lines begin thick at the bottom, then they wave and they taper to a very fine point. Now, in the 13th illustration, the Vignette appears on a tablet describing the rising of the mountains and the forming of a gaseous belt. Now, was that referring to the clouds that encompass Venus? I doubt it, but there is that possibility. He goes on to say, therefore, we see the Egyptians, they obtained their symbol of fire, also the scarab and the Nakals from India carried them into Egypt. The Egyptian fire symbol today is a modification of the Naga. The Egyptian, he puts a handle on the Naga and he turned it into a sword. Now we find it very hard to find the reason for the Egyptian change or modification, and as we study the hieroglyphics, they wanted to depict two different forms of fire, the fire of the underneath and the actual fire. This they did not record, this they did to record the destruction of the motherland, which they say it sank in a fiery abyss and was enveloped in flames as she went down. Not necessarily under the sea as the archaeologists and the historians have assumed. Now we find this symbol is shown in the chapters of the Egyptian sacred book of the dead, which you've heard me refer to before. Now they have another emblem or symbol we'll call number 14. And this colonel, he said that he considered it the most interesting of all of those that were found in the Nakal tablets. He said that it depicts a man, or a man's advent on earth in the land of Mu. He said, I shall first dissect it by showing apparently or separately each symbol. He goes on to say, A is the lotus, the symbolic flower of Mu. B, 3 pieces of foliage given Mu's numeral. All right, the hieratic letter of M, Mu's alphabetic symbol, and D, the Ta, which was the symbolizing resurrection, emerging, coming forth, to appear, the head of the Ta, being the letter M, also means land. So land is emerged. Or it's talking about, I don't think that he understood, it was talking about a world, a separate world of ancient Mu. So this is why they had to misinterpret or dream up this story about the sunken civilizations of Mu and Lemurra and Atlantis and all of these pre-Adamic verging on the mythological world. But we find too much archaeological evidence to any longer say that it was some esoteric, mystical land. Now, F is the Ka, we said K-E-H, or Ki, the first man. The Vignette tells us 3 times the name of the land. Mu is the symbol, A-B-C. Man symbolizes F in the act of appearing on the earth, leaping in the exuberance of his spirit. Now, the Vignette was the cause of his worldwide search as he started to look for information regarding Mu. And he found that these tablets included several subjects, and it required a series of tablets to explain each subject. And each series ran from 2 tablets, and the shortest to 16, the longest. Now, fortunately for us in this day and age, we find that he found 2 tablets that were keys to the various symbols and hieroglyphics, and then he started to arrange the tablets as follows. We're going to describe here in a minute. In other words, like back in the times of Napoleon and so forth, and the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, that was the key that unlocked all of these ancient languages and hieroglyphics that had remained a lost art and a secret for centuries, and kept the door closed on the light of the ancient world. Now, his Series 1, he found a description of the creation down to and including the advent of man. Now the rising of the mountains by the fires of the underneath, was they talking about the gases of the inner earth and the provisions for the disposal of future gases. And they go on, they describe in the different series the origin and the working of the great forces throughout the universe. And we know, as those of you who are cognizant of all of the different books of Enoch that have come out of the East to Russia to Europe, many of them varying in different lengths and shorter versions, if they can be believed, out of the lost books of the Bible and the forgotten books of Eden that we have spoke about. But it tells us then of an ancient antiquity, a man who was escorted personally through the universe by the name of Enoch, and he was shown all of the astronomical signs and conditions and about the rotation of the earth and the earth revolving around the sun and all of these mysteries. And he wrote them down, but it appears that we have just a little tip of the iceberg, that most of these books are still lost. Just like they find some of these Dead Sea Scrolls over there that these scholars have worked on for the last 40-some years, and the Jews don't want them revealed. They don't want them brought out. They don't want them published. Now, who in the world can stop or has the right to tell us what message, if it be indeed from God or His prophets, who are they to tell us that this cannot be circulated throughout the world? Is it telling on somebody and they don't want to be told upon? So when we go back and we try to follow their alphabet, we find the A's, the lotus, the symbolic flower of Mu, and then they show 3 different pieces of foliage here that gives Mu's numeral. Now, was that also symbolic? And he didn't understand it. They were trying and alluding to a family tree or the tree of life, the very same one as we said the Egyptians referred to as the house of light. Then the heretic M is Mu's alphabetical symbol. The D, the Ta, symbol of resurrection emerging, coming forth to appear. The head of the Ta, being the letter M, also means a land. So land is emerging. E is the water symbol. The emerged land is surrounded by water. Now, could this be telling? I want to be fair. I've been wrong before about some things. But is this going back like in Proverbs, the 8th chapter, where the Almighty's addressing the Adam man, I'm assuming? A lot of people, well, I won't even cover that. But anyway, to try to keep this brief, he is telling the Adam kind that you were with me before the dust of the earth. You were with me before this world was. You were there beside me, he says, when I set the bounds, that the water might not flood these lands and so forth. So is this going back? Is this possibly a record or part of the record that's talking about the first landing of this particular mankind here upon the earth? Now the Vignette also tells 3 times the name of the land, Mu, by the symbols A, B, and C. Man's symbol F is the act of appearing on the earth and leaping in the exuberance of his spirit. Now there is a lot of these things and the great forces, and but they go on in the his 5th series. This is very odd. Now you got to remember, this book was published first in 1931. The origin and the workings of the Earth's great atomic force, it tells us. And he goes on, he tells us it's a subdivision of one of the 2 principal divisions. The Series 6, they go into the origin of the force that creates and sustains life, and it's working, a subdivision of one of the 2 principal divisions. Series 7, it tells of the origin of life, showing what life is and the changes in the form of life, imperative as the earth starts to develop. Then his 8th series, I'm just trying to keep all this very brief. He starts about telling about the creation of man, showing what man is and in what way he differs from all of the other creatures. Now, our Bible tells us all flesh is not of the same flesh. There's the flesh of the man, the flesh of beast, and the flesh of the human. Now, a lot of people say we're all human. I said, no, we're not all human. The brief book of Jude, just before the book of Revelation, says we're not all human. It talks about these fallen extraterrestrials that kept not their first estate or their worlds. He calls them wandering stars. He said they're dark clouds without any water. In other words, he comes right out and he says they're destitute of spirit. They sit at the feast tables with your children, deceiving us, because we are a bunch of dummies that never studied and bothered to search this out or have the intestinal fortitude to stand up for truth. So the word human comes from the word human, meaning spirit man. And the Bible talks about all kinds of people that are destitute of spirit. Now there's a lot of these people on this earth that are referred to as a beast creation. They are body and they're soulish, from the word nephesh. But it talks about another type of man who is, like Paul referred to him, as body, soul, and spirit. Now churchianity would have you believe, if you do Pentecostal calisthenics all the way down the aisle and you go up to the wooden altar and get your head massaged and you're all prayed up and paid up and the preacher tells you that you're ready to go up, in other words, to return to a place from whence you never came, that all of a sudden he's going to holler Shazam and blow you an ethereal kiss, and all at once you've got a spirit which you never had before. This is nonsense. It's scientifically inaccurate. Now he goes into his 9th series here. He tells about the advent of man on the earth and where he first appeared, which was called the tablets of the motherland. Unquestionably, they were only the commencement of a long series of the early history of Mu and the descendants of Mu's, those who were pilgrims. Now we can't help but wonder, are these the people that Christ spoke to in the books of John in your New Testament? He says, and where I go, you cannot come. And he told the people in the John, the 8th chapter, he said, I am from above, you're beneath. I am of my Father, you're of your father. Your father was a murderer from the beginning. This was the great con and the great murderous act, even of a greater proportion than religiosity has ever dreamed, spoken of in the first chapters of Genesis. And then Christ went on to elaborate in many of the prophets of old and Job and all of this that we've alluded to over and over, that they have tried to tell us about a great wars beyond the scope of our mortal imagination that took place in antiquity. So, anyway, we have to try to pin down who are these people and from whence they came and where are they going. But it sounds like a lot of these people are merely earthbound, bodies terrestrial. He said, and there's bodies celestial. And as you have borne the image of the heavenly, you shall again bear the image of the heavenly once again. So, my friends, we have many different schools of thought here. Mu, Ma, mother, Kave, womb of the morning, coming forth out of the womb, a chamber. Is this actually an ancient record that was condensed into our Bible? Was this really some of the Adamites that got kicked out? Let's see. We find, without going into all of it, let's go back. They try to tell us in this ancient mysteries of Mu, where this old priest, he made a lot of this simpler for the man, where he goes in and he tells about how the shafts of the sun, they went into the atmosphere and they gave life, and there was heat to warm the earth. And let's see, there was a good point here that I really thought, let's see, originally, he goes back to say the universe was only a soul or a spirit. Everything was without life, and it was calm and silent, soundless, void of dark in the immensity of space, and only the Supreme Being, the great self-existent power, the great creator. Now notice they say the seven-headed serpent moves through the abyss of the darkness. Doesn't that sound like Genesis, the very second verse? And the Spirit of God began to move upon the face of the waters. Was this a forgery of the Almighty's original word, or was it that this ancient priest and those who thought they had captured the theme of the language here didn't understand in toto what they were reading? It goes on to say that the desire came to him to create worlds. He created worlds, and the desire came to him to create the earth with living things upon it, and he created the earth and all therein. And in this, the manner of creation, the earth with all the living things upon it. Now, he goes on, then he says, the seven superlative intelligence of the seven-headed serpent gave seven commands. I shall use a nakal. And he goes on, he tries to tell us that this means the esoteric, in other words, the hidden secret meanings, as they are the most intelligent to the reader. Now the demotic are all symbolic and they're easily understood. Now the first intelligent command here was, let the gases which are without form and scattered through space, let them be brought together, and out of them let the earth be formed. The gases then assemble themselves into the form of a whirling mass. Well, I get just a little bit dubious, my friends, when they go back and give me stuff like this, because like the Almighty said, he was without a beginning, he was without an end, and I don't believe any scientist or anybody with any kind of intelligence can tell us exactly how old all those stars and planets and things are in outer space. I think they're kidding themselves and kidding us too. But we know that every time that there's a supernova or some planet blows up and it creates dust and rocks and they float through or shoot through space as asteroids and all, eventually they are collected together and become a molten mass and they start another world. The Almighty never destroys anything. Eventually, in the endless array of time, things are merely recycled. He goes on from this ancient writings to tell us the second command was, let the gases solidify to form the earth. Then the gases solidified and volume was left on the outside, out of which water and the atmosphere were to be formed. And volumes were enveloped within the new world. Darkness prevailed, and there was no sound, yet neither the atmosphere nor the waters was formed. Then he goes on, tells third commandment, let the outside gases be separated. And, well, let me jump ahead here. And let's see. The fifth commandment, that sounds very much like our Genesis. Let life come forth in the waters, and the shafts of the sun met the shafts of the earth in the mud of the waters. There formed cosmic eggs. In other words, life germs is what he thought that meant. And out of the particles of the mud, and out of these cosmic eggs came forth life as commanded. Now then he goes on to say the sixth command was, let life come forth upon the land, the shafts of light met the shafts of the earth, and out of the dust of the land the cosmic eggs, and so forth. That life came forth from the earth as was commanded. Now here's the interesting thing in this figure 6c that he brings out, showing the shafts here, and he goes on and says, and when all of this was done, the seventh intellect said, let us. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Is this the great frauds usurping the Almighty? But think about this. And doesn't that ever puzzle the Christian world when they read in Genesis? Now, well, listen, it sounds very much like this one. Let us make man after our own fashion. Let us endow him with powers to rule the earth. Then the Narayana, the seven-headed intellect, the creator of all things throughout the universe, created man and placed within his body a living, imperishable soul, and he became like the Narayana in intelligent power. Then was creation completed. My friends, you are not a creation. You are a son of God. Now there are beasts and creatures and peoples here upon this earth that I would call created. And he goes on to say the seventh command are without doubt also indicative of 7 time periods. A period of time is not measured. Now listen, this is what I tried to bring out repeatedly throughout the different talks, that these jerks that would ridicule the Bible, try to put down Christendom, and destroy people's faith, and then a lot of ignoramuses in Christendom, many of them self-appointed preachers, claiming that God actually did, the great creator, the great force spirit, the ever-living, the almighty, that he actually created this planet and all this universe out here in 7 days. You know, there are people still believing that, and there's also a flat earth society, believe it or not, still in existence in this day and age. My mind's made up. Please don't confuse me with the facts. Now, listen to this. This colonel, as he writes here, the 7 commands are without doubt also indicative of 7 periods of time. A period of time is not measured by any particular number of years. It only means a day, a year, or millions of years. How many times have I said the word day there is mistranslated from the age, eon, or time period, which you cannot pin down to any certain number of days. So, when we find the arrival of the Adam kind here on the earth and the arrival of the pre-Adamics, according to our Bible and according to these ancient accounts, which I don't say are all wrong, we cannot actually pin the time down of the arrival of the different species and subspecies of mankind. Thus, these tablets do not assign any particular length of time to creation. It may have taken millions or tens of millions of years to accomplish what was recorded on these tablets. It is merely stated that the earth was created in 7 periods of time, not in 7 days, he says, as recorded in the biblical legend. Well, see, this man, he was a very brilliant, articulate archaeologist and a great student. But his thinking, his mind, he had a mindset, and it was, his attention was focused upon one segment of this ancient world, and he didn't have time to go and research into the Bible, and he probably never even heard of a concordance in his day, even though it was in existence at that time period. But so we find the general resemblance of the open part of the, what they call the Nakal record as regard the story of creation. The account that's found in the Bible is very remarkable as parallel here. And it's also remarkable how great are the divergencies thereafter of the legends of creation that are prevalent among all the people throughout the world. In all instances, I have found so much of this material that's identical, and the only conclusion that we can draw is that they have a common origin, and their genesis or their beginning was possibly in Mu. But it's, what was this talking about? The house of the Almighty? Was this Kaveh? Was this the womb of the morning? Because you remember, at one time when everything was groovy like an old-time movie, everybody had his headquarters in the house of the Almighty until they were kicked out of the headquarters and limited to their own little grubby world, or the new worlds in which they were sent, those that had survived the great catalytic upheavals of those ancient days and had survived through the wars, and who were migrant workers transported to the Almighty's new world. Please turn your tape over to side 2. Thank you. We're left here together to possibly try to unravel and dissect a great mystery here, what is referred to in these ancient beginnings, the alpha beginning, shall we say, the seventh command. Here was the hardest of all to translate, the Colonel says. The actual deciphering, he tells us, was very easy. But he found it impossible to find modern words that would convey identically the same meaning of the words of the ancients. Well, we've been through this and discussed this before. For instance, he said soul or spirit was the nearest words we could find to represent that what was put in the body of a man. The word living may or may not be exactly what was intended as the original. Now, the word here, imperishable. Now, I'm adding my own idea. Was this an illusion somehow that he missed to immortality or the loss of this whatever we lost in the Garden of Eden, and death started to ensue? But we will continue on with what he's saying. The word imperishable, he goes on to tell us without doubt, absolutely correct. But what does the phrase after our own fashion actually mean? Certainly not in our own image, he says. It is in some way, it refers to mentally and mystic powers. That is substantiated by the words, he said, endow him with powers to rule the world. Now, was this just a vain, egotistical claim that was taken on by the ancient Khan or Cain, that he could identify with as being one of these special endowed people, which I believe he had a half of it, and he did come down with great powers, like a lot of people will say mystical powers and so forth. But I believe if they understood the ancient language correctly, it was talking about those who had scientific powers, which actually did appear as mystical to the primitives. Just like you've heard me mention over there about the ancient cargo cults that still build in the jungles up on the mountainsides these replicas of our airplanes from the Second World War, when they used to bring trade goods and so forth to the natives to help us fight against the Japanese. And they are still sitting over there waiting for the return of the gods from the sky that brought the goodies in the giant ship. Now, if we go back, we find that the Bible, it used a good symbolic example when it refers to the breath of God. Now, at any rate, it is clear that the meaning is special powers received from the Almighty may therefore be looked upon as a part of God, as a leaf is part of a tree. Now, this is what this colonel said way back then. He goes on, he says, man came from God and must return to him from whence he came. But if the man had just read the book of Revelations, where it tells us the leaves of the trees are for the healing of the nations. And so we're talking about the great trees of space, the great family trees, and these planets out there. And you and I, we are allegorically and through the idiom of the leaf, that we are part of a tree, but not the whole tree. And that when we wake up and find out what a part of what tree and to who we belong, then that we could have the sustaining power of that giant tree, like David was referred to as a giant oak tree that stood still by the stream as it went by and knew who the Almighty God was. So, this is why we're going into this and drawing power and proof of our Bible as to who we are and why we're here and what is the purpose of this. Now, then, the call tablets, they were exceedingly difficult to decipher, he tells us, and being so many ligonettis and tabulets and so little heretic writing, that some of these parts also were so worn, obliterated, that he said he could make nothing out of them. The words appear for which we find no equivalent in the modern day language. And we didn't understand the language. We didn't understand the idioms and the allegories. And so here we are today. But we're never going to get any knowledge back unless we put forth a little effort. But this man, even back in 1931, well, when his book came out, and even prior to that, he had discovered that as he looked through the different teachings and reflecting upon the teaching of these tablets, that there was others comparable that ran parallel with them, like in the Hindu literature, and also older literature than even the Hindu. For example, now, if I should pronounce any of these, you can write me a nasty letter. But I don't spend every day studying upon these things. But there was the, let's see, what was it he called? The Manava, the Harma, Shastra book. Number 2, Sloka. And it started out, in the beginning only existed the infinite call Adite. A-D-I-T-E. Book 1, S-L-O-K-A, Sloka 8. He says the germ became an egg. Book 1, Sloka 10, the visible universe in the beginning was only darkness. Book 1, Sloka 9, he first produced the waters, then deposited an egg. Then we go to the Rig Veda, Veda, section 3, chapters 1, 2, and verses 4, pages 316 and 17. They got their time all wrong here. I'm positive of this, but they go 2000 to 2500 BC. Goes in, he tells about how this egg that reproduced the intellect of the Supreme Being under the form of Buddha, through whose union with the goddess, now get this, Maya, or Maya. Today, think about it, the only difference between this and the Mayan, or Mayan of Mexico, M-A-Y-A, and it's M-A-Y-A-N. But it was called the Mayan, see, instead of Mu. Mayan was the good mother of all the gods and all the men. This corresponded with Adam and Eve, who existed many centuries, according to our Bibles and so forth, years later. But then you go to page 3, other than him nothing existed, darkness there was. Page 4, he who also measures out the light of the air. Then we have the Aitarya, Ramya, Slokas 4 to 8. Originally, this universe was only a soul. Nothing active or inactive existed, and the thought came to him, I wish to create worlds. So he created the worlds, the light and the mortal beings, and the atmosphere that contained the light, and the earth that is imperishable, and the lower depths and out of the water. Then in Yucatan, right here, see, this really was. This world was taken over by these ancient peoples. In Yucatan, then you had the Nahuatl. And they go into the stories of the particles of atmosphere on being hit by the divine arrows that came animated, and heat which determines the movement of matter was developed in it. Now, what I think they were doing, they were actually trying to explain the atoms and neutrons and protons, and if you want a lesson on that and study it, then get your encyclopedia out. I'm sure that most of you are aware of and understand this without me taking up any more tape on that. So we find there's no question whatsoever that both the written and the legendary history, it says that these books were written from ancient temple records, and the Nakals, they wrote the temple histories, and they taught religion and science. And so we go back into southern India, we find that the temples had great libraries of ancient writings, but none apparently go back beyond the Sanskrit. And this colonel, he went on to say, I worked over several of these with the high priest, and they were all in Sanskrit on religious subjects, as they were all in, as none of them contained any facts of historical value. He said, I was not sufficiently interested to continue their study. It's probably written by some of the ignorant liberals of their days, very much like a lot of these people. As my granddad used to have an expression, he said they can talk all day on a half bushel and don't say anything. But we find as we study through all of these records of the ancient past that there's considerable variations of the legends of the creation in different sections of the world, which no doubt is due to the manner of which they've been handed down from generation to generation. And it seems by the time they got to our language that this cross-reference, there was certainly a lot that was lost in it. Startling as it may appear, the most scientific version, and the one above all others, except in the call, that can be substantiated by geographical, geological research, as in the version found among the semi-savages and the cannibalistic races of the South Sea Islands, apparently the Marquesians. We find as we go back the Hindu and the Chaldean and the Egyptian and the Mayan and the Greeks in later times, they described the creation, eliminated the scientific sections, and recorded by the use of symbols the fact without the whys and the wherefores, and the reason of this is being told by Clement of Alexandria. Now, before we get into that, I want to bear out that this colonel, he was right on. Now, this Colonel James Churchward, let's see, I had it here somewhere. Now, some of you might remember I referred to Sargon the Magnificent. Was written many years ago by a Mrs. Sidney Barstow. Let's see, I'm trying to remember. In 1927 was the book first published, and then for a season there it was published in paperback. Let's see, for those of you that might be interested, Well, this was last published in 1971 by the Covenant people of Vancouver, BC. I don't know if they're still in business or not, but that's the last time it was published. But anyway, on page 128, I found a very interesting thing. It starts out, it says, replacing the word Semitic by Adamic. This opinion agrees with my own that the original rules given to Adam, listen, were perverted in Babylon by Cain, and she says, under the devil's influence. Well, I believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that he was not only of the devil's influence, but his father himself was the great Baal of yesteryear, and this great Con was his offspring. He goes on to say cannibalism, or she goes on to say cannibalism, like idolatry, is usually supposed to have been invented by savages and primitive tribes. But this opinion seems to be discounted by the fact that it was connected from the first with ritual and ceremonies. Now, we left out a great deal going back to the laws and the times of Mahabharata and so forth, who a lot of people try to give us this hogwash that Moses got his law from him. No, he did not. The reason why it is not legislated against the law of Moses is obviously because such a crime was unthinkable even among the Hebrews. Well, naturally, it was not legislated against in the Code of Hammurabi because it was practiced by the priests of Hammurabi. The ceremonial meals of Nintu, of Kish, to which mysterious references are made in the Code of Hammurabi, were in all probability cannibalistic feasts, such as which horrified the first discoverers of Mexico. And I don't believe that all of it's told about why, and I'm not trying to defend the Catholic Church because I don't have any use for its ancient and despots and what they did to the Indians, so-called, of the Americas, But when they went in there and they started killing the Aztecs and so forth, who was offering up human sacrifice, and we know that even go back in Solomon to Moloch, they offered up sacrifice, and the law was written, he who offers the sacrifice must first partake of it. And so obviously there was a cannibalistic ritualism that went on there that was participated in by those people. And I believe that they were taught by Cain as very Sargon and his cohorts. So anyway, we find from the ancient civilization that the country is attributed to the children of the sun. There are many strong reasons to connect it with that of Babylon. Remember Sunday? Cain was called the sun god. He took all of the glory of the sun and of the universe upon himself, making himself a god. Now we find, she goes on to say, one link between the ancient Babylonian civilization and the children of the sun. Keep that in mind, sun worshippers, the Aztecs, and you remember the Chinese and especially the Japanese Yapan, goat god, as I've said, of the land of the rising sun. I'm not saying, no, don't go out of here and say that I said that the people of Mexico are bad. I've met many of them, very sweet, charming, kind, loyal, hard-working people, and also applicable to the Japanese. But they ain't none of them crazy about you white boys. And when push comes to shove, guess who goes with who? But anyway, so as she said, one link between the ancient Babylonian civilizations and the children of the sun is that in the colonies founded by them, the knowledge of an All-Father, which always seems to have existed, side by side with the worship of grotesque. Remember, as I pointed out in times past, ugly as sin, as with the worship of grotesque deities, just as in Babylon, the knowledge of God existed in the beginning of history, although creatures of men's imagination were worshipped. Then she puts in some footnotes here. Most kinds of cannibalism are hedged around with ceremonial regulations, and we are justified in the references of all forms of endo-cannibalism to a ritual order. Encyclopedia Britannica, 2nd edition, speaking of cannibalism. It is true that there are indications that human flesh had once been consumed in the honor of the spirits of the earth, as Professor Maspero had lately shown, which must have also been the case in prehistoric Egypt. Did you get that? Prehistoric Egypt. This is from the Hibbert, Hibbert lectures, page 83. Also, point number 2, according to some commentaries, the prophet Micah, 3rd chapter, 3rd verse, accuses the Israelites of cannibalism. And it may well be that it influenced at one time by their Canaanite neighbors. They adopted that practice along with other idolatrous customs. We find that Moloch and Chiun, Chiun, the gods worshipped by the Canaanites, Amos 4:26, probably represented the devil and Cain, quote unquote here. 9:2 was Ishtar, she says, the lady of the gods. And she refers us to Deluge Stories, page 63. Wished I had that, but this is an ancient book, and if you're lucky enough to find one of them, let me know. But this was, she's quoting a fellow by the name of L. King. And she goes on to say the appendix D. But even, she goes on to say that even among the Bushmen of Australia, to which land Sir Arthur Kenneth tells us Asiatics journeyed by sea many thousands of years ago, an All-Father to whom a truly divine nature is ascribed is secretly honored, while public worship is given to a god represented by the Brahmanthus insect, which very suggestively is called alternatively Kagan, C-A-G-N, or Kagan. I, silent I, K-K-A-G-A-N. It sounds very much like Con or Cain, doesn't it? And you see the C-A-G-N, like they have tried to hide the real culprit behind all this, Cain, Con, by changing the letter, but dumb white boys don't think of that. And also already mentioned, with the tradition of the sun god reached the Pacific Islands, his name was reverted to Cain, as in canine, dog. K-A-N-E. Just like you get out your concordance, check it out. Cain was spelled very similar, K-A-I-N. Now we find, she goes on to say, other evidence suggests that the children of the sun originally ruled, like we find this other author of Mu and so forth, he said they ruled over Tahiti. It is said that formerly some of the chiefs claimed descent from the great god Cain, K-A-N-E, evidently a sun god, Sunday worshipper. The Iku-Pa, I-K-U-P-A-U, Pau, was direct descendants of Cain, the god of, oh mercy, Ku-Mu-Henu, K-U-M-U-H-E-N-U-A, the first man, or claiming to be the first man, therefore saying that all men came out of him, so he was the God-man who we mere mortals descended from. Now Cain, being the sun god, the Iku-Pa, could therefore be of the sun, and thus the ancient Hawaiian societies fell into line with that of the archaic civilization in general, and I've never had the good fortune to come across this book, The Children of the Sun. And this is quoted from it, pages 167 to 311, and this was written by W.J. Perry, P-E-R-R-Y, in 1923. But I imagine if you were to go to your libraries and you would search that out, but there's many things that we could go and talk to about on Cain. But, well, we left off back here in discussing the people of Mu, the Hindu, the Chaldean, the Egyptian, the Mayan, and the Greek. And I think that we, through more sources than one, have made this quite evident that this man was on the right track describing the creation, eliminated the scientific section and the record by the use of the symbols and the facts without the whys and the wherefore. And the reason for this was told by Clement, he said, of Alexandria, who said, quote, the Egyptians neither entrusted their mysteries to everyone or degraded their secrets of divine matters by disclosing them to the profane, reserving them for the heir apparent to the throne and to such of the priests who exulted in virtue and wisdom. In other words, the esoteric meaning was not given out publicly. Now, as we said, we know at one time there's quite evidence of this Ham who went down into Egypt, although he was not of Noah, as we are taught by the some of the still dark age ignorant religiosity, which I don't buy, but I also believe that it, well, all you have to do is look at the frescoes and the ancient murals found in the tombs of these kings, that some of the Hamitic type, which I believe to have been a Negroid or possibly of an octoroon species, who went down into Egypt to take over, rule temporarily, but we've discussed this in other tapes. But it seems to me that, like the adversary of this world, and so many of these preachers, when they want to find somebody to lay it on, they pick on the black man. Like that, what was the movie, Jesus Christ Superstar, and they made Cain out to be a black man. No, I do not believe Cain was a black man, or even part black. I really don't. I don't think this should be laid at the foot of the black people. Now I believe that the black people, just like the silly white people and Asiatic people, that we were caught up and we were deceived by this ancient Baal or Baal, the great wicked one who declared himself as God, and this fool that came down into ancient Babylon said he was going to go back to the heavens and take over and set his throne above God, as we quoted to you from Isaiah. But in other words, we go back where here we spoke of the fact that they talked about in esoteric meanings and so forth, that it was not to be given out publicly to the, shall we use the analogy of the thundering unwashed herd, as it were. But you remember, even the disciples of Christ, on more than one occasion, they asked him, "Why do you speak in parables?" He said, "Because I do not want them to understand, lest at any time they would hear with their ear, see with their eye, their heart would be converted, and I would have to save them." Contrary to what your pasteurized pastor teaches you, there are people here on this earth that are of a wicked generation, Athene ethnos race, that he said that he has perpetual hatred against, and he will wipe them out. He said there will not be a Canaanite left in the house of God, and he said that he's going to ride from the heavens and destroy Edom from off the face of the earth. And from Daniel through other prophetic books, he said, "I will not leave them root nor branch." You say that is hate, that is bigotry, that is segregation. Yes, you're right. That's what he said, and that's what he wrote. He did it. I blame the Almighty. If you don't like it, you take it up with him and see how far you're going to get. So, but we are told in the book of Matthew, "Blessed are your eyes, for they see, and your ears, for they hear." Not the gospel of sloppy agape, but the gospel of the kingdom, of the rule, fulfilling the ancient prayer of those so many with blinded spiritual eyes. They still prayed faithfully, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in outer space." Well, now to bear out something, I guess you might say from an egotistical standpoint, if you like, to prove a point that I have tried to make. And if I'm wrong, please forgive me and bear with me. But we go back, and through his records and the numbering of the tablet, let's see, number 1231, he had one that he entitled the symbol of the sacred four. Today we have organized religiosity that they talk about, oh yes, the holy city of God, the city that's four square. Well, my friends, I do not know of one thing in all of nature that is square. Anything that is square is made by man. So, as we've pointed out in the records of the ancient past, and is given credit to it in the, well, there's dozens upon dozens of, I have, I think, probably 2 full, very big shelves full of pyramidology books. In my earlier years in getting interested in the Bible, I was quite fascinated with it. But I've become very suspicious of it. And I find so many people, like the UFOs, have made a religion out of it. So let's go back for what this symbolically sacred four is. I find, and I'm reminded, my point is this, that in the we find that the sacred of the Enoch circle, pi times r squared. This was called the sacred circle, the Enoch circle, and many other names But here we find it among these other ancient people, the symbol of the sacred four, under which there was innumerable names and guises, and they played an important part in man's conception of the Creator and the creation of the earliest times, writing down to and including, as he said, in his present time of the writing of this first book. But then he has a very interesting figure here that, like I said, you definitely must remind me to send you photostatic copies that you might have a visual aid here. And it brings it out so quite clear to me, bringing a lot more credence to it when he said he took these flaming cherubims like whirling swords and placed them at the entrances to the Garden of Eden, that they may not enter therein. So there was hundreds of years that nobody had the capability in order to even try to open those gates or bars, as Job called them in the 38th chapter, to find entrance back into the house of life. But as we say here, this seven-headed serpent, he boasted about 7 planets, or 7 worlds possibly, that he alluded to, that he was in charge of. And so how do we know how far advanced they are in technology, if they truly do still exist somewhere in the universe that we're not aware of? So we find that, well, anyway, it's like a swastika. But instead of having sharp right angles, it has like 4 curved sword blades with other swords coming out of them. Now, was this symbolic of the sacred circle of Enoch, the divine circle? A circle of pi times r squared? Well, the Nicole writings tell us that the sacred four was the Creator commands that involved law and order from chaos throughout the universe. When they had completed this work, they were given charge of the physical universe. Now you go and you look at this man pointed out back then, church word there, that the Mexican tablets say identically the same thing. The Nicole writings throughout give them symbolic names, and Nicole tablets, which might tell us what the sacred four are, beyond the fact that they were the first 4 great commands in creation is missing. As the sacred four were commands, they naturally were given to something to be executed. What was that something? Hitherto, he said, I found nothing among the ancient records and writings that tell us, but this tablet supplies information. Would anyone think that this was a mere assertion on my part? He said, I've given a dissection of the deciphering and the translation of the tablet, number 1231, he entitled it, just like you take the evidence into the courtroom. And he said the central figure of the diagram, or vignetta, is a circle, which is the picture of the sun as Ra. Aha, there we go, Ra. Now we're dealing with the Egyptians who knew that there was a one and a supreme God, Ra. Now he goes on to say that the collective or the monotheistic symbol of the Creator. It was the first 3 symbols used in religious teachings, as it was monotheistic. It was the most sacred of them all. Number 2, within the circle, he said we find the hieratic letter H of the motherland's alphabet. The motherland. Remember? Ma, Mu, Eve, mother of all living. And it was these same godless people that understood these ancient things that added that into our Bible, that Eve was the mother of all living. And today that even all these ancient heathens, they try to say that they come from, even if they did not come from the mother of all living. In other words, they're the Zomboe, as the ancient book of the Manu tells us, the walking dead, and they cannot enter into a futuristic kingdom. But anyway, so within the circle of the letter H is the motherland's alphabet, being a hieratic letter, it carries a symbolic meaning. It is the alphabetical symbol of the sacred four, as it is within the circle, it is within the Creator. Thus, the sacred four is within the Creator and comes out of His mouth. Out of His mouth. So in other words, are they referring to the door? The circular doors of the house of the Almighty. His powers or force, they go on to say, or forces. The sacred four, the great primary forces, are thus shown directly coming from the Creator, as the ancients termed it, His desire, His wishes, His command. 3. This is the symbolic of a force. The base shows where the origin of the force is, and the point, the direction to which the force takes in its working. And this vignetta, the force is working from west to east. You see, vice versa as to what the Nazis had on their as the direction of their swastika, and the Friedrich Haberman wrote way before the Second World War that he, using that symbol, that it was going the wrong direction, he said this would cause them to lose, and etc. and so forth. But anyway, so that be as it may, number 4, each of the four forces has an arrow, a spear, a dart, or a javelin head, which is a symbol of activity. See, activity. In other words, we're talking about energy creates energy. Showing that force is not dead, but remains active and continues in one direction from the west to the east. Well, my friends, if the Venus, the house of the Almighty, is in the east, why are they saying from the west to the east? The ancients understood this and wrote this, and with this was accomplished that they were given charge of the physical universe. I'm still quoting. And now this glimpse, as it's called, it forms the great geometricon. Now he goes on to say that the word is written within each of the four forces. So here it is called the four geometricons, the four great primary forces. They are the primary force because they're depicted as coming directly from the Creator Himself. He goes on to say this glimpse is formed by crossing the four forces, and all are moving from west to east. The point forms a circle symbolizing the universe. They are therefore govern the movements of all bodies throughout the universe. It shows that all bodies that revolve are revolving from the west to east, and that all circuits made by knowing bodies are from west to east. Thus they are moving on a center, and is symbolically showing the center, the primary force, which is the great infinite, the Almighty. Now being symbolically shown, this center does not apply to any particular spot in the universe. It applies to He Himself. He is the Creator, at whose commands all movements of bodies are made, either directly or directly through substantiary forces, in which force are produced by or through the workings of other forces, some possibly being what are termed, as he said back then, 1931, atomic forces. So for the people who think that this is esoteric mumbo-jumbo, whereupon the service for the uneducated and the dull of wit and those who have not got the eyes to see, it would seem like esoteric mumbo-jumbo, but I think lying within this, that if we could go a little farther and uncover these things, there are some great secrets hid away there. Now, so we go out of Niven's 2,600 tablets, over 1,000 are about the workings of the four primary forces. The last glimpse, number 6, is a common one. He said, I've yet to find the first archaeologist who has mentioned it and who has not mistaken it for the swastika. Now, everybody said, oh, this is the sign of the Aryan, the neo-Nazi. But as I told people, and even Professor Haberman and those that are always dragging his book out, they show dozens upon dozens of different types of swastikas. They have no idea what they really stand for, and it's talking about a great force, a great atomic power. And you think this esoteric mumbo-jumbo? Well, what about Christ and the New Testament? He says, you don't even know from whence the wind comes and whence it goes. They didn't even know the source of the power of the wind. So how are they going to know some of these deep things that were lost, waiting for the intelligent, the open-minded, and the scientific to rediscover. Now, there might even be something here to substantiate and a basic secret to the a puzzle as to why we die and to its overcoming. Anyway, I won't get off and pontificate. So we get the tablet, number 988. He said that this tablet, it referred to one of the great, now get this, great magnetic primary forces. It shows that this great magnetic force is existent throughout the universe. This universe is symbolized as being within the two outer circles. Now, lately, gosh, I sure wish you could see some of these ancient symbols here. They're very much like those symbols that they found not only out west in North America, but over in England, in that nation there, where the wheat fields were all trodden down. Everything was so symmetrically perfect and ran for maybe, I can only guess, a quarter or a half a mile. And finally they come up with a couple old codgers and try to tell us they went out and spent all night long beating these wheat fields down with nobody seeing them, and then turn around and trying to show that the UFOs and the people that did these are a hoax. No, my friend, all you have to do is look at those pictures and the perfect alignment of them, and you'll know that it's a farce. But you'll find some of these very symbols here, to me, they compare very much to those that were in the British fields. And so then they go into all these circles and the outer circles, and they tell of the central circles that symbolize the Creator. The curved lines running throughout the universe are the lines of the force, and the lines being curved in the regular phenomenon, which originated from a revolving body, as is shown, is from west to east. This is corroborated, he says, by the force symbol below, which points to the direction taken by the force. Well, it looks to me sort of like a flying saucer, UFO, but I think a lot of this is we're going to have to take up at another time on another tape. And I certainly hope that we haven't even got started on this, and I hope that I haven't belabored it. But from this, he said we go over to Niven's collection, and they show very much the same thing on these Mexican stone tablets. So why is it that, well, myself, I've lived and been in the jungles of Central and South America, way down into the Amazonies of Colombia and of Peru, and I've seen the Chinese back in the 50s living in Panama, where I spent 18 months, and they look no different than the Chinese and Asiatic types I found living in San Diego and San Francisco. So you have basically 3, 4, 5 races? And, it's a great phenomenon here, and the white man, he wants to take credit for discovering this country. Well, my friend, the Oriental, he was here tens of thousands of years before the white man. The Negroid, the Asiatic, he appeared on this earth long before the Anglo-Saxon. So we'll break this tape off now. Write to me, Pilgrim Ships or Noah's Books, P.O. Box 10.